After a decade of not telling anyone about her sexual assault, Sydney finally decided to tell her husband. As funny as it sounds, she says, we were watching The Bachelor and one of the contestants was talking about something that happened to her, and it was clear that she had been silent about the sexual violence for years. My husband paused the TV and said he couldn't even imagine having to be alone with that secret, and said if something had ever happened to me, that I could tell him and that he would be supportive. So, a few weeks later, Sydney told her husband what had happened, and as promised, he was very supportive. It was scary to tell him because it made it feel more real, because it was also a huge weight off my shoulders, and a true start to my healing. If he hadn't opened up the conversation and made me feel like I could talk to him about it, my healing would have never taken place. Sydney, like many survivors, didn't feel that her story fit into the stereotypical mold of sexual violence because it was someone that she knew. But in fact, 8 out of 10 rapes are perpetrated by someone we know. Sydney's family reacted in an unsupportive way when she told them what had happened. They said she was selfish. My father said the story was made up, and for a parent to react that way was crushing. I didn't tell my story because I didn't feel like it was safe to go to the police, the hospital, or my family. I had seen examples over and over again in the media about survivors telling their story and not being believed, and I just couldn't survive that. For many years, I felt the effect of the sexual violence without even knowing what it was. I did such a great job of silencing myself as a survivor. I convinced myself that I was tough enough. I was using unhealthy coping mechanisms, though, like overworking, excessive drinking, overeating, and that led to type 2 diabetes for me. For years, I thought I had to change my body in order to feel comfortable in it, but now I know that I don't have to wait for anything to start loving my body. As Sydney reclaimed other parts of her life, she's rebuilt her confidence. She says, I don't feel ashamed or disgusted with myself anymore. This is just a part of my story, and I want to be able to tell my story. For years, Sydney lived with panic attacks as a result. At first, she didn't know what they were, but now she understands and usually knows the signs of a trigger, and she's found ways to avoid them. Sydney was a high-achieving student on the track for a medical scholarship, but the trauma and the assault distracted her from her studies. She says, I blamed myself. There were so many dreams that I let go and went unrealized because of my trauma, because I didn't think that I could do it. I needed to seriously consider the cost of this sexual violence and the missed opportunities for myself and the missed potential. Sydney's advice to other survivors is not to compare their trauma. In sharing our stories, it's most important not to compare our experiences. The worst thing that could happen to us may be different, but it's still the worst thing that's happened to us. Even though while healing, my story is different. My story is mine. I still identify with the language of others, and I know what happened to me, and I take seriously what happened to them. Hiking and spending time in nature have been important in Sydney's life. Not only healthy coping mechanisms, but a symbolic way of healing. She says, when I finally am alone with my thoughts and the sounds of the forest, my healing has truly begun. For over a decade, I felt like I was holding my breath. And when I finally was able to share my story, I felt like I could finally exhale. For survivors who feel like they're just not getting anywhere, turn around and look at how far you've come. You survived it. You're here.